My name is Elena Rodriguez, and at my sister's wedding reception, my mother-in-law, Patricia Blackwood, stood up during the toast and announced to 300 guests that I had stolen her son and destroyed their family. The entire ballroom fell silent as she accused me of being a manipulative gold digger who had turned her beloved Marcus against his own mother. But what she didn't know was that hidden in Marcus's childhood bedroom was a letter she had written 23 years ago. A letter that would expose the truth about who had really been doing the manipulating all along. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Grandview Country Club in Westchester County, New York, was everything my sister Isabella had dreamed of for her wedding venue. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across cream-colored walls adorned with gold accents, while floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of manicured gardens that seemed to stretch endlessly into the Hudson River Valley. The reception hall buzzed with the gentle hum of conversation, clinking champagne glasses, and the soft melodies of a string quartet positioned near the dance floor. I had spent the morning helping Isabella prepare for her special day, adjusting her cathedral-length veil, and ensuring every detail of her vintage-inspired gown fell perfectly. As her maid of honor, my responsibilities extended far beyond simply standing beside her during the ceremony. I had coordinated with vendors, managed the timeline, and handled countless small crises that threatened to disrupt what was supposed to be the most important day of her life. The ceremony itself had been flawless. Isabella looked radiant as she walked down the rose-petal-strewn aisle toward her fiancé David, who stood waiting with tears of joy streaming down his face. Their vows were heartfelt and personal, reflecting the genuine love they shared after 5 years of dating and 2 years of engagement. Even the weather had cooperated, providing the perfect October afternoon with golden sunlight filtering through autumn leaves. But as we transitioned into the reception, I felt an undercurrent of tension that had nothing to do with typical wedding day stress. Patricia Blackwood, my mother-in-law of 3 years, had been shooting disapproving glances in my direction throughout the entire day. Her behavior was not unusual. She had maintained a facade of polite hostility toward me since the day Marcus first brought me home to meet his family, but something about her demeanor today felt different, more purposeful and calculating. Patricia commanded attention wherever she went, a skill she had perfected during her 30-year career as a corporate executive, before retiring to focus on what she called family investments. At 62, she maintained an imposing presence through her perfectly styled silver hair, designer clothing that probably cost more than most people's monthly salaries, and a voice that could silence a room with its authoritative timbre. She had built her identity around being the matriarch of the Blackwood family, a role she protected with fierce determination. Marcus and I had been married for 3 years, together for 5, and throughout our entire relationship, Patricia had made it clear that she believed her son had settled for someone beneath his social and economic status. I was a high school English teacher from a middle-class Hispanic family in Queens, while Marcus was a successful investment banker whose family had deep roots in Westchester County's affluent community. According to Patricia's worldview, our marriage represented a step down for her son and a calculated social climbing move on my part. The irony was that Marcus and I had met in graduate school at Columbia University, where we were both pursuing master's degrees, his in business administration, mine in education. Our connection had been intellectual and emotional long before either of us knew about the other's family background or financial status. We spent countless hours in the library discussing literature, politics, and our dreams for the future. He fell in love with my passion for teaching and my commitment to making education accessible to underserved communities. I fell in love with his genuine kindness and his desire to use his financial expertise to help nonprofit organizations maximize their impact. But Patricia had never shown interest in understanding the foundation of our relationship. Instead, she focused on what she perceived as evidence that I was using Marcus for financial gain. She criticized my career choice as lacking ambition, despite the fact that I had chosen teaching because I wanted to make a meaningful difference in young people's lives. She questioned my motives when Marcus and I bought our first home, suggesting that I had pressured him into purchasing something beyond what my teacher's salary could support. She even managed to find fault with my family's expressions of gratitude when Marcus generously helped my younger brother with college tuition, interpreting their thanks as evidence that I was exploiting her son's generosity. The wedding reception was progressing beautifully, despite the undercurrent of tension I felt whenever Patricia was nearby. Isabella and David's first dance was magical, their joy infectious as they moved gracefully across the floor, while guests watched with warm smiles. The dinner service was flawless, featuring locally sourced ingredients prepared by the country club's award-winning chef. Speeches from the best man and my father were heartfelt and humorous, generating the perfect combination of laughter and tears that makes wedding receptions memorable. I was beginning to relax and enjoy the celebration when the time came for family toasts. Isabella's new father-in-law spoke first, welcoming her into their family with genuine warmth and expressing his excitement about gaining a daughter. My parents followed with a toast that reflected their deep love for both their children and their gratitude for the wonderful partners Isabella and I had found. The atmosphere was filled with love, acceptance, and celebration of family bonds that transcend blood relationships. Then Patricia rose from her seat at the head table, champagne glass in hand, and the energy in the room shifted perceptibly. She had not been scheduled to speak, and I noticed Marcus tense beside me as his mother commandeered the microphone. Her smile was perfectly composed, but I recognized the steel beneath her polished exterior from 3 years of navigating her subtle and not-so-subtle disapproval. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet reception hall. "I want to thank Isabella and David for including all of us in this beautiful celebration of love and commitment." She paused, allowing her gaze to sweep across the room before settling directly on me with an intensity that made my stomach clench with apprehension. "Family is precious," she continued, "and we must protect it from those who would seek to exploit it for their own gain. Some people enter our lives wearing masks of affection, while harboring ulterior motives that become clear only after significant damage has been done." The room remained silent, but I could sense the discomfort rippling through the guests as they began to realize that this was not a typical wedding toast. Marcus reached for my hand under the table, his grip tight with tension and growing anger at his mother's public display of hostility. My son Marcus was raised to be generous and trusting, qualities that make him vulnerable to individuals who recognize his good nature as an opportunity for personal advancement, Patricia said, her voice growing stronger and more accusatory with each word. "When someone steals your child's heart and loyalty through manipulation and calculated behavior, it breaks a mother's heart in ways that are difficult to describe." The wedding reception had transformed from a celebration into something resembling a courtroom drama, with 300 guests serving as an unwilling jury to Patricia's character assassination. I felt heat rising in my cheeks as whispers began circulating through the room, some guests recognizing that they were witnessing an unprecedented breach of wedding etiquette and family harmony. "Elena Rodriguez," she said, speaking my name with particular emphasis that made it sound like an accusation, "has systematically isolated my son from his family, convincing him that our love and concern represent interference in his life. She has transformed a young man who once valued family loyalty above all else into someone who chooses sides against the people who raised him and sacrificed everything for his success." Marcus started to rise from his chair, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment, but I placed my hand on his arm to stop him. Something about Patricia's theatrical performance felt calculated and desperate, as if she was trying to provoke a reaction that would validate her accusations. I had learned over 3 years of dealing with her manipulation that responding emotionally often played directly into her hands. "Patricia," Marcus said, his voice tight with controlled fury, "this is neither the time nor the place for this conversation. Isabella and David deserve better than having their wedding reception turned into a platform for your personal grievances." But his mother was not finished. She had planned this moment carefully, choosing the most public and emotionally charged setting possible to maximize the impact of her accusations. "A mother knows when her child is being led astray by someone who cares more about financial security than genuine love," she declared. "The truth always reveals itself eventually, and I pray that my son will recognize the manipulation before it destroys everything our family has built together." The silence that followed her words was deafening. Even the string quartet had stopped playing, leaving only the sound of uncomfortable shifting in chairs and whispered conversations as guests processed what they had just witnessed. Isabella looked mortified that her wedding reception had been hijacked for family drama, while David appeared torn between defending his new sister-in-law and avoiding further confrontation on his wedding day. I stood slowly, maintaining eye contact with Patricia while fighting to keep my voice steady and dignified. "I understand that you have concerns about your son's happiness," I said, speaking clearly enough for everyone in the room to hear. "However, Marcus is an intelligent adult who is perfectly capable of making his own decisions about his life and relationships. Your accusations are unfounded and hurtful, not just to me but to everyone who came here to celebrate love and family." Patricia's smile never wavered, but I could see satisfaction in her eyes at having successfully created the confrontation she had orchestrated. "Time will tell, dear," she replied with false sweetness. "The truth has a way of surfacing when we least expect it." What Patricia did not know was that her words would prove more prophetic than she could have imagined. Hidden in Marcus's childhood bedroom, tucked away in a box of memorabilia that had remained untouched for over 2 decades, was a letter that would reveal the true source of family manipulation and expose the lengths to which she had gone to control her son's life and relationships. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The reception continued, but the celebratory atmosphere had been irreparably damaged by Patricia's public attack. Guests made polite conversation while clearly processing what they had witnessed, and I spent the remainder of the evening fielding sympathetic looks and whispered expressions of support from people who recognized the inappropriateness of Patricia's behavior. But as devastating as that moment felt, it would ultimately become the catalyst for discovering a truth that had been hidden for 23 years. A truth that would not only vindicate me, but reveal the extent of Patricia's manipulation and the tragic consequences of her need to control every aspect of her son's life. The real story was just beginning, and the letter that would change everything was waiting to be discovered in the most unlikely of places. The drive home from Isabella's wedding reception was conducted in tense silence, with Marcus gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles had turned white against the darkness of our car's interior. The autumn evening had grown cold, and fog was beginning to settle across the winding roads of Westchester County, creating an atmosphere that matched the emotional climate inside our vehicle. Neither of us knew how to process what had happened, or more importantly, how to move forward from such a public and devastating attack on our marriage and my character. Marcus finally broke the silence as we pulled into our driveway in Scarsdale, the home we had purchased together 3 years earlier, with careful financial planning and genuine excitement about building our future together. "Elena, I am so sorry," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion and shame. "I knew my mother disapproved of our relationship, but I never imagined she would publicly humiliate you at Isabella's wedding. Her behavior was inexcusable, and I will not allow her to continue treating you this way." I appreciated his support, but I could see the pain in his eyes that went beyond embarrassment about his mother's inappropriate behavior. Patricia's accusations had planted seeds of doubt that would continue growing unless we addressed the underlying issues that had enabled her to maintain such destructive influence over her adult son's life. The public nature of her attack had been calculated to create maximum damage, while forcing Marcus to choose between defending his wife and maintaining peace with his mother. The following morning, Marcus called his mother to demand an explanation for her behavior and an apology for the pain she had caused both me and Isabella's wedding celebration. Their conversation, which I could hear through our bedroom wall, quickly escalated into a shouting match that revealed years of accumulated resentment and unresolved family dynamics. Patricia refused to apologize, instead doubling down on her accusations and demanding that Marcus acknowledge what she characterized as my manipulative influence on his life and decisions. During that heated phone conversation, Patricia made a statement that would prove to be the key to unlocking a decades-old mystery. In her anger and frustration at Marcus's unwillingness to accept her version of reality, she shouted, "You have no idea what I sacrificed to protect you from people who would have destroyed your future. I have been fighting manipulative women since before you were old enough to understand how dangerous they can be." Those words struck Marcus as oddly specific and historically weighted, suggesting experiences that preceded our relationship by many years. After ending the call, he sat in contemplative silence before sharing something he had never told me about his family history. When Marcus was 15 years old, his father had briefly left the family home under circumstances that were never fully explained to him. Patricia had claimed that his father was dealing with work stress and needed space to resolve professional challenges. But Marcus had always sensed that there were deeper issues involved that he was too young to understand at the time. "My father came back after 6 months," Marcus explained. "But he was different afterward. Quieter, more withdrawn, like something fundamental had been broken inside him. My mother never talked about what happened during that period, and whenever I asked questions, she would change the subject or become upset. I learned to stop asking, but I never stopped wondering what really occurred during those months when our family fell apart." This revelation sparked a conversation about family secrets and the ways that unexplained events from the past can continue influencing present relationships. Marcus realized that his mother's hostility toward me might be connected to whatever had happened during that mysterious period when his father had left the family home. The intensity of her accusations and her references to protecting him from manipulative women suggested that she was fighting battles that had very little to do with our actual relationship. We decided to visit his childhood home the following weekend, ostensibly to collect some belongings he had left in his former bedroom, but actually to search for any evidence that might explain his mother's extreme behavior and provide context for her accusations. The Blackwood family home was an imposing Tudor-style mansion in one of Westchester's most exclusive neighborhoods, with manicured grounds and architectural details that spoke of generational wealth and social prominence. Patricia was attending a charity fundraiser that weekend, providing us with the opportunity to search through family documents and personal items without triggering another confrontation. Marcus had kept his bedroom largely unchanged since leaving for college, with athletic trophies, academic awards, and childhood memorabilia creating a time capsule of his adolescent years. The room felt frozen in time, preserving a version of Marcus that existed before whatever family trauma had shaped his understanding of relationships and loyalty. As we began sorting through boxes of old-school papers, photographs, and keepsakes, I was struck by how few images included his father after Marcus turned 15. The family photographs from his elementary and middle school years showed a close-knit family with genuine warmth and affection, but the later pictures revealed a noticeable distance between his parents and a forced quality to their smiles that suggested significant underlying tension. The breakthrough came when Marcus discovered a wooden box hidden behind winter clothing in his bedroom closet, a container he did not remember placing there, and that appeared to have been deliberately concealed from casual discovery. Inside the box were documents, letters, and photographs that painted a completely different picture of his family history than the version Patricia had carefully constructed and maintained for over 2 decades. The most significant discovery was a letter dated 23 years earlier, written in Patricia's distinctive handwriting, and addressed to someone named Sarah Mitchell. The letter was never sent, evidenced by the lack of postmarks or mailing labels, but its contents revealed a calculated campaign of manipulation and deception that had destroyed relationships and lives in ways that Marcus had never imagined possible. The letter read, "Sarah, I know you believe that James loves you and that your relationship represents something meaningful and lasting. However, I cannot allow you to continue deluding yourself about a future that will never materialize. My husband's infatuation with you is nothing more than a midlife crisis that threatens everything our family has built together. I have worked too hard and sacrificed too much to allow a woman like you to destroy our financial security and social standing." The letter continued with detailed descriptions of steps Patricia had taken to sabotage the relationship between Marcus's father James and this woman Sarah. She had intercepted phone calls, hidden letters, spread false information about Sarah's character and motivations, and created elaborate deceptions designed to convince both parties that the other had lost interest or found someone else. The manipulation had been systematic and ruthless, involving private investigators, forged documents, and deliberate misinformation campaigns that had successfully destroyed what appeared to have been a genuine emotional connection. More disturbing were Patricia's descriptions of psychological pressure she had applied to James, threatening divorce, social humiliation, and financial ruin if he continued pursuing the relationship. She had leveraged their social connections, business relationships, and shared assets to create a situation where leaving the marriage would have resulted in professional and personal destruction. The letter revealed that James's 6-month absence from the family home had not been voluntary space for reflection, but rather a period when Patricia was systematically dismantling his relationship with Sarah, while applying relentless pressure for him to return to the marriage. The final paragraphs of the letter were perhaps the most chilling, as Patricia described her determination to prevent Marcus from ever learning the truth about his father's relationship or the methods she had used to preserve their marriage. She wrote, "Marcus must never know about any of this. He idolizes his father and believes in the fairy tale of happy marriages and lasting love. If he discovered what really happened, it would destroy his faith in family loyalty and commitment. I will do whatever is necessary to protect him from these painful truths, even if it means controlling his relationships and ensuring that he never becomes vulnerable to the kind of manipulation that almost destroyed our family." As I read that letter aloud, Marcus's face went through a series of emotional transformations, from confusion to anger to heartbreak, as he realized the extent of his mother's deception and control. The woman who had raised him to believe in family loyalty and trust had systematically destroyed his father's happiness, while building her own security on foundations of manipulation and emotional blackmail. More significantly, she had been applying the same tactics to his adult relationships, viewing any woman who might influence his decisions as a threat to her continued control over his life and choices. Additional documents in the box provided further evidence of Patricia's ongoing surveillance and interference in Marcus's relationships throughout his college and early professional years. She had hired private investigators to research his girlfriends, contacted their employers and families to gather information that could be used against them, and maintained detailed files on women she considered threats to her influence over her son's life and future decisions. The discovery that proved most devastating to Marcus was a series of letters between Patricia and his college advisor, correspondence that revealed she had been monitoring his academic performance, social relationships, and career planning throughout his university years. She had influenced his course selections, internship opportunities, and even his choice of graduate school, through careful manipulation of information and subtle pressure applied, through seemingly helpful suggestions and family expectations. One letter from his senior year showed that Patricia had actively discouraged a relationship between Marcus and a classmate named Jennifer Chen, a woman he had described to me as his first serious girlfriend, and someone he had genuinely cared about during college. Patricia had researched Jennifer's family background, discovered that her parents were immigrants who owned a small restaurant, and had systematically planted doubts about the relationship's viability through conversations about social compatibility, career ambitions, and family expectations. The pattern was unmistakable and deeply disturbing. Patricia had spent Marcus's entire adult life treating his relationships as threats to be neutralized, rather than connections to be celebrated and supported. Her accusations against me were not based on any actual evidence of manipulation or gold-digging behavior, but rather on her fundamental belief that any woman who influenced her son's decisions represented competition for his loyalty and affection. Marcus sat in stunned silence as we processed the implications of these discoveries. His entire understanding of his family history, his parents' relationship, and his mother's motivations had been built on carefully constructed lies designed to maintain her control while preserving his idealized vision of family loyalty and commitment. The woman who had raised him to value honesty and integrity had built her own life on systematic deception and emotional manipulation that had destroyed multiple relationships and caused immeasurable pain to innocent people. The letter that Patricia had never sent revealed not only her methods but also her mindset, showing someone who viewed relationships as zero-sum competitions, where love and loyalty were finite resources that must be carefully guarded and controlled. Her belief that protecting her family required destroying other people's happiness had created a cycle of manipulation that was now being directed toward our marriage and my reputation within the family and social circle. As we drove home that evening, Marcus and I discussed the profound implications of what we had discovered. The hidden letter had not only vindicated me against Patricia's accusations, but had revealed the true source of family dysfunction that had been operating for over 2 decades. More importantly, it had shown us that breaking free from this pattern of manipulation would require courage, determination, and a willingness to confront painful truths about family loyalty and the difference between love and control. The letter had given us the evidence we needed to understand Patricia's behavior, but it had also presented us with difficult choices about how to use this information and whether confronting her with the truth would create healing or simply escalate the conflict to even more destructive levels. The real question was not what the letter revealed about the past, but what we would choose to do with this knowledge to protect our future and build the kind of healthy, honest relationship that had been denied to Marcus's father all those years ago. The week following our discovery of Patricia's hidden letter and decades of systematic manipulation required careful consideration of how to proceed with the explosive information we had uncovered. Marcus and I spent hours discussing the implications of confronting his mother with evidence of her deceptive behavior, weighing the potential benefits of exposing the truth against the risks of permanently fracturing family relationships and creating irreparable damage to already strained dynamics. The ethical dimensions of our situation were complex and challenging. On one hand, we possessed documented evidence that Patricia had deliberately destroyed relationships, manipulated family members, and built her influence through systematic deception spanning over 2 decades. Her accusations against me at Isabella's wedding were clearly part of a larger pattern of controlling behavior that had caused immeasurable pain to innocent people, including Marcus's father and the woman named Sarah Mitchell, whose relationship had been sabotaged through calculated interference. On the other hand, exposing Patricia's behavior would inevitably create consequences that extended far beyond our immediate family situation. Marcus's father, James, now 65 years old, had apparently made peace with his circumstances and built a stable life within the constraints of his marriage. Revealing the truth about Patricia's manipulation might provide vindication for past injuries, but it could also reopen wounds that had taken decades to heal and create new conflicts that would be difficult to resolve. Marcus struggled with the realization that his entire understanding of his family history had been built on carefully constructed lies designed to maintain his mother's control while preserving his idealized vision of family loyalty and commitment. The discovery that Patricia had monitored and manipulated his relationships throughout his college and early professional years had shattered his trust in her motivations and forced him to reevaluate every major decision he had made with her input or guidance. More significantly, Marcus was grappling with the recognition that his mother's accusations against me were not based on legitimate concerns about my character or motivations, but rather on her pathological need to control his emotional attachments and prevent any outside influence from challenging her dominance over his life choices. This realization was both liberating and devastating, as it validated his instincts about our relationship while revealing the extent to which his family dynamics had been distorted by manipulation and deception. During our discussions, we identified several potential approaches for addressing the situation, each with distinct advantages and risks that required careful evaluation. The first option involved confronting Patricia directly with the evidence we had discovered, demanding that she acknowledge her behavior and provide explanations for her actions. This approach would offer the satisfaction of holding her accountable, while potentially creating opportunities for genuine dialogue about family dynamics and the need for changed behavior patterns. However, direct confrontation also carried significant risks, including the possibility that Patricia would respond with denial, counter-accusations, or escalated manipulation designed to discredit our evidence and maintain her version of family history. Her demonstrated skill at psychological manipulation and her investment in preserving her constructed narrative suggested that she would not accept responsibility for her actions without implementing defensive strategies that could create additional damage to family relationships. The second approach involved sharing our discoveries with Marcus's father, James, providing him with information about his wife's past behavior and allowing him to make informed decisions about how to proceed with this knowledge. This strategy would respect his autonomy while potentially offering validation for experiences he might have questioned or suppressed over the years. James deserved to know the truth about how his relationship with Sarah Mitchell had been sabotaged and the methods Patricia had used to force his return to their marriage. Yet this approach also presented ethical complications, as revealing Patricia's deception to James would inevitably force him to confront painful truths about his marriage and the woman with whom he had spent the past 23 years rebuilding their relationship. At his age and after decades of established patterns, discovering the extent of his wife's manipulation might create psychological and emotional trauma that would be difficult to process and integrate into his understanding of their shared history. The third option involved documenting our evidence thoroughly, while implementing protective measures for our own relationship without directly confronting Patricia or involving other family members in the immediate conflict. This strategy would focus on establishing boundaries and safeguards that prevented further manipulation while allowing Patricia to maintain her constructed narrative as long as she respected our autonomy and ceased her interference in our marriage. This approach offered the advantage of avoiding direct confrontation while protecting our relationship from continued sabotage, but it also allowed Patricia's behavior patterns to continue unchallenged and potentially affect future relationships within the family or social circle. The passive strategy felt insufficient given the magnitude of her deception and the pain she had caused to multiple people over many years of systematic manipulation. After extensive deliberation, Marcus and I developed a fourth approach that combined elements of accountability with strategic protection of our relationship and family stability. We decided to implement a graduated response that would begin with clear boundary setting and escalate to direct confrontation only if Patricia continued her manipulative behavior, despite explicit warnings about the consequences of her actions. The first phase of our strategy involved Marcus having a direct conversation with his mother about her inappropriate behavior at Isabella's wedding and the impact of her accusations on our marriage and family relationships. During this conversation, he would establish clear boundaries regarding her future interactions with me and explicitly state that any further public or private attacks on my character would result in immediate consequences, including potential separation from family events and social gatherings. This initial conversation would serve multiple purposes, including providing Patricia with an opportunity to modify her behavior voluntarily, while demonstrating Marcus's unwavering support for our marriage and his rejection of her attempts to create division between us. The conversation would also serve as documentation of our efforts to address the situation through direct communication before implementing more severe consequences for continued manipulation. The second phase of our strategy involved preparing comprehensive documentation of Patricia's historical behavior patterns, including the hidden letter, surveillance records, and evidence of interference in Marcus's previous relationships. This documentation would be organized professionally and presented in a format that could withstand scrutiny while clearly demonstrating the systematic nature of her manipulation over multiple decades. We recognized that effective documentation would be crucial if the situation escalated to the point where we needed to involve other family members, legal professionals, or social contacts who had witnessed Patricia's behavior and needed context for understanding our responses to her accusations. The evidence needed to be compelling and credible, while respecting the privacy of individuals who had been affected by her past manipulation. The third phase involved developing a support network of family members and friends who could provide emotional support and practical assistance if Patricia escalated her manipulation in response to our boundary-setting efforts. This network would include my family members, Marcus's colleagues who had witnessed Patricia's inappropriate behavior, and mutual friends who understood the dynamics of our relationship and could provide objective perspectives on the situation. Building this support network required careful consideration of which individuals possessed the maturity and discretion necessary to handle sensitive family information, while providing meaningful assistance during what could become a prolonged and emotionally challenging conflict. We needed allies who would support our position based on their direct knowledge of our relationship, rather than simply taking sides in a family dispute they did not fully understand. The fourth phase of our strategy involved preparing for potential escalation scenarios, including the possibility that Patricia might respond to boundary setting with increased manipulation, public attacks on our reputation, or attempts to involve other family members in campaigns designed to isolate us from social and familial support systems. These preparations included consulting with legal professionals about potential defamation issues and developing communication strategies for responding to false accusations or misleading information. We also prepared responses for various family and social situations, where Patricia might attempt to create public confrontations or manipulate group dynamics to generate support for her version of events. These preparations involved practicing clear, factual responses to potential accusations, while maintaining dignity and avoiding defensive reactions that might be interpreted as validation of her claims about our relationship. The implementation of our strategic response began with Marcus scheduling a private meeting with his mother at a neutral location, where they could have an uninterrupted conversation about her behavior and the consequences of continued interference in our marriage. He chose a quiet restaurant during off-peak hours, providing enough privacy for serious discussion, while ensuring that the public setting would discourage emotional outbursts or manipulative tactics that might be employed in more private environments. Marcus prepared for this conversation by writing detailed notes about specific incidents of inappropriate behavior, including her public accusations at Isabella's wedding, her historical pattern of interference in his relationships, and the impact of her actions on our marriage and family harmony. He practiced delivering his message with calm authority while anticipating potential responses and preparing appropriate replies that would maintain focus on behavior modification rather than personal attacks or character judgments. The conversation strategy emphasized specific behavioral changes rather than demanding acknowledgement of past wrongdoing, recognizing that Patricia was unlikely to accept responsibility for her historical manipulation, but might be willing to modify her future behavior to avoid consequences that would affect her social standing and family relationships. Marcus planned to focus on concrete expectations for respectful treatment, while avoiding discussions of motivations or psychological analysis that might provoke defensive reactions. During our preparation process, we also developed contingency plans for various potential outcomes of the initial conversation, including scenarios where Patricia agreed to modify her behavior, situations where she denied wrongdoing while agreeing to behavioral changes, and possibilities that she would refuse to acknowledge any problems with her conduct or accept any limitations on her interference in our relationship. Each contingency plan included specific next steps that would escalate our response appropriately, while maintaining our commitment to protecting our marriage and establishing healthy family dynamics. We were prepared to implement increasingly serious consequences for continued manipulation, while remaining open to genuine efforts at behavior modification and relationship repair. The strategic planning process strengthened our relationship by requiring us to articulate our values, priorities, and expectations for family interactions while developing practical skills for managing difficult personalities and complex family dynamics. We emerged from this planning phase with increased confidence in our ability to handle Patricia's manipulation while maintaining our integrity and protecting our marriage from continued interference. Most importantly, the strategic approach represented a shift from reactive responses to Patricia's manipulation toward proactive management of family relationships, based on clear boundaries and consistent consequences for inappropriate behavior. This transformation from victims of manipulation to active agents of change would prove essential for establishing the healthy family dynamics we needed to build our future together. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine whether Patricia was capable of respecting boundaries and modifying her behavior, or whether more dramatic measures would be necessary to protect our relationship from continued sabotage and manipulation. The restaurant Marcus selected for his conversation with Patricia was a small establishment in downtown White Plains, sufficiently removed from their usual social circles to provide privacy, while maintaining the neutral atmosphere necessary for productive dialogue. The location featured intimate seating arrangements with enough ambient noise to prevent eavesdropping, yet remained quiet enough for serious conversation without raising voices or creating dramatic scenes that might attract unwanted attention from other patrons. Marcus arrived 15 minutes early to secure a corner table that would provide optimal privacy while allowing him to observe Patricia's arrival and demeanor as she entered the restaurant. This preparation time also permitted him to review his notes one final time and center himself emotionally for what would likely prove to be one of the most challenging conversations of his adult life. The weight of the hidden letter and documented evidence of his mother's manipulation rested heavily in the briefcase beside his chair, serving as both motivation and insurance for the difficult discussion ahead. Patricia entered the restaurant with her characteristic poise and commanding presence, scanning the dining room with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to evaluating social environments and establishing her position within them. She wore a tailored navy blazer with gold buttons that conveyed professional authority, while her perfectly styled hair and subtle but expensive jewelry projected the image of successful sophistication that had served her well throughout her career in corporate management and social leadership roles. Her greeting was cordial but cautious, suggesting that she suspected this meeting involved more than casual family conversation. Patricia possessed keen instincts for detecting potential challenges to her authority, and had likely spent considerable time analyzing Marcus's unusual request for a private lunch meeting that occurred outside their normal pattern of family interactions. Her wariness was evident in the careful way she arranged herself at the table, and the measured tone she employed during initial pleasantries about the weather and recent community events. Marcus began the conversation by acknowledging the uncomfortable nature of their discussion, while establishing his determination to address issues that could no longer be ignored or minimized through polite avoidance. His tone remained respectful but firm as he outlined his concerns about her behavior at Isabella's wedding and the broader pattern of interference in his personal relationships that had created ongoing tension within their family dynamics. "Mother, I need to discuss your public accusations against Elena at Isabella's wedding reception," Marcus stated clearly. "Your behavior was inappropriate and hurtful, not only to Elena, but to everyone who attended what should have been a celebration of love and family unity. I cannot allow such attacks on my wife's character to continue without addressing the underlying issues that motivated your actions." Patricia's initial response involved a predictable combination of defensive justification and deflection tactics that had served her well in previous family conflicts. She characterized her wedding remarks as expressions of legitimate maternal concern rather than inappropriate public attacks, suggesting that Marcus was overreacting to honest observations about relationship dynamics that others were too polite to articulate. Her framing attempted to position herself as the courageous truth-teller, while casting Marcus and Elena as overly sensitive individuals who could not handle constructive criticism about their marriage. "Marcus, I understand that you feel protective of Elena, but I was simply expressing concerns that any loving mother would have about her son's welfare," Patricia replied with practiced sincerity. "If my words seemed harsh, it was only because I care deeply about your happiness and want to ensure that you are making decisions based on genuine compatibility, rather than temporary infatuation or misguided loyalty." Marcus had anticipated this response and was prepared with specific examples of behavior that transcended legitimate parental concern and crossed into manipulation and interference. He described her pattern of negative comments about Elena during family gatherings, her attempts to schedule conflicting activities during important events in our relationship, and her persistent efforts to undermine our decisions about housing, career choices, and financial planning through subtle criticism and unsolicited advice designed to create doubt and discord. The conversation gradually escalated as Marcus provided increasingly specific examples of inappropriate behavior, while Patricia maintained her position that her actions represented normal parental involvement rather than destructive interference. Her defensive responses revealed the depth of her investment in controlling the narrative about family relationships, and her inability to recognize the difference between loving guidance and manipulative control. However, the dynamic shifted significantly when Marcus introduced information about her historical pattern of relationship interference that extended far beyond her interactions with Elena. Without revealing the existence of the hidden letter, he described his growing awareness that her disapproval of his romantic relationships had been consistent throughout his adult life, and had involved tactics that went far beyond expressing opinions or offering guidance. "I have been thinking about your reactions to every serious relationship I have had since college," Marcus explained. "Your disapproval of Jennifer Chen, your negative comments about Sarah Williams, your efforts to discourage my engagement with Lisa Martinez during graduate school. The pattern suggests that your objections are not based on specific concerns about individual women, but rather on your fundamental opposition to any relationship that might influence my decisions or reduce your role in my life." This observation struck closer to the core issues than Patricia was comfortable addressing, and her response revealed both the sophistication of her manipulation techniques and her growing awareness that Marcus was developing insights that threatened her carefully constructed version of family dynamics. She attempted to reframe the discussion by questioning his memory of past events and suggesting that his current perspective was being distorted by Elena's influence on his interpretation of family history. "Marcus, I think you are allowing current tensions to color your recollection of past situations," Patricia replied with calculated concern. "I have always supported your relationships when they seemed healthy and appropriate. If I expressed reservations about particular individuals, it was based on legitimate observations about compatibility and long-term potential, rather than any desire to control your personal life." Marcus recognized this response as a classic manipulation technique, designed to undermine his confidence in his own perceptions while maintaining her position as the reasonable party in their conflict. He had observed her use similar tactics throughout his childhood and adolescence to resolve disagreements with his father and other family members, creating doubt about alternative perspectives while presenting herself as the voice of wisdom and stability. The conversation reached a critical juncture when Marcus directly addressed the boundary violations that had occurred at Isabella's wedding and established clear expectations for Patricia's future behavior regarding his marriage and family relationships. His tone remained calm but conveyed unmistakable authority as he outlined specific consequences that would result from continued interference or public attacks on Elena's character. "Mother, I need you to understand that Elena is my wife and my chosen partner for life," Marcus stated with quiet intensity. "Any future public or private attacks on her character, any attempts to undermine our relationship, or any efforts to manipulate family or social situations to create conflict between us will result in immediate and serious consequences for your involvement in our lives and future family events." Patricia's response to this boundary setting revealed both her surprise at Marcus's assertiveness and her calculation about how to respond to this unprecedented challenge to her authority within their family structure. She had not expected him to establish such clear consequences for her behavior, and her momentary silence suggested that she was evaluating whether to accept these limitations or escalate the conflict through increased manipulation and pressure tactics. Her eventual response involved a sophisticated combination of apparent concession with subtle counter-manipulation designed to maintain her position while avoiding direct confrontation with Marcus's ultimatum. She expressed regret for any misunderstanding that might have resulted from her wedding remarks while carefully avoiding acknowledgement of wrongdoing or acceptance of responsibility for the pain her actions had caused. "Marcus, I apologize if my comments at Isabella's wedding were misinterpreted or caused unnecessary distress," she said with practiced diplomacy. "My intention was never to embarrass Elena or create family conflict. Perhaps I should have expressed my concerns privately rather than during such a public occasion. I will certainly be more mindful of appropriate timing and settings for family discussions in the future." Marcus recognized this response as a partial victory that established his ability to influence his mother's behavior, while falling short of the genuine acknowledgement and behavioral change that would be necessary for long-term resolution of their family dynamics. Patricia had agreed to modify her public behavior without accepting responsibility for her manipulation or committing to fundamental changes in her approach to family relationships. The conversation concluded with Marcus reiterating his expectations for respectful treatment of Elena, while Patricia maintaining her position that her concerns had been legitimate, even if her expression of those concerns had been inappropriately timed. Both parties left the restaurant with different interpretations of what had been accomplished, setting the stage for continued testing of boundaries and consequences as Patricia evaluated whether Marcus was truly prepared to enforce the limitations he had established. During the drive home, Marcus reflected on the conversation with mixed feelings about its effectiveness and implications for future family relationships. He had successfully communicated his disapproval of Patricia's behavior and established clear consequences for continued interference, but he remained uncertain about whether she would respect these boundaries or simply develop more sophisticated methods for maintaining her influence and control. The conversation had revealed the depth of Patricia's investment in her manipulative tactics and her skill at deflecting responsibility while appearing to make concessions. Her response suggested that she viewed the conflict as a temporary challenge to be managed, rather than a fundamental problem requiring genuine change in her approach to family relationships. Most significantly, the conversation had demonstrated Marcus's growing ability to recognize and resist his mother's manipulation techniques while maintaining his commitment to protecting our marriage from continued interference. His willingness to establish clear boundaries and consequences represented a crucial development in his psychological independence from Patricia's controlling influence. However, the conversation had also revealed that Patricia possessed sophisticated skills for maintaining her position while appearing to make compromises, suggesting that future conflicts would require even greater vigilance and stronger consequences to prevent continued manipulation. The initial confrontation had been a necessary first step, but it was clear that additional measures would be required to establish the healthy family dynamics necessary for our marriage to thrive without constant interference and sabotage. The test of Patricia's sincerity would come through her actions in the following weeks and months, as she either respected the boundaries Marcus had established or revealed the true extent of her commitment to controlling his relationships, regardless of the consequences for family harmony and his personal happiness. The initial period following Marcus's confrontation with Patricia created a deceptive calm that resembled the eye of a storm, more than genuine resolution of their family conflict. For approximately 3 weeks, Patricia maintained an outward appearance of compliance with the boundaries Marcus had established, demonstrating polite civility during necessary family interactions while avoiding direct criticism of our marriage or public displays of disapproval regarding my presence at family events. This temporary behavioral modification provided Marcus with cautious optimism that his boundary-setting efforts had achieved meaningful results without requiring escalation to more severe consequences. He interpreted Patricia's restrained behavior as evidence that she recognized the seriousness of his ultimatum and was making genuine efforts to improve family relationships through modified conduct and increased respect for our autonomy as a married couple. However, my experience with Patricia's manipulation patterns over the previous 3 years had created deeper skepticism about the authenticity of her apparent compliance. Her sudden transformation from openly hostile behavior to polite cooperation seemed strategically calculated, rather than reflecting genuine acceptance of the limitations Marcus had imposed on her interference in our relationship. The abrupt nature of her behavioral change suggested tactical retreat rather than fundamental attitude adjustment. My suspicions proved justified when Patricia began implementing a sophisticated counter-strategy designed to circumvent Marcus's explicit boundaries while maintaining plausible deniability regarding her continued efforts to undermine our marriage. Rather than abandoning her campaign against our relationship, she adapted her methods to operate within the constraints Marcus had established, while pursuing her original objectives through more subtle and indirect approaches. The first indication of Patricia's evolved strategy emerged during a family dinner at her home, an event that had been scheduled prior to Marcus's confrontation, and represented the first test of whether she would honor the respectful treatment guidelines he had outlined during their restaurant meeting. The dinner invitation itself appeared to demonstrate good faith compliance with his expectations, suggesting that she was prepared to include me in family gatherings without creating uncomfortable situations or hostile atmospheres. Patricia's behavior during the dinner was superficially cordial and appropriate, maintaining polite conversation while avoiding direct criticism or confrontational statements that would have violated Marcus's explicit boundaries. However, her compliance with the letter of his requirements while systematically violating their spirit demonstrated sophisticated understanding of manipulation techniques that operated below the threshold of obvious boundary violations. Throughout the evening, Patricia employed subtle exclusion tactics that marginalized my participation in family conversations without creating incidents that Marcus could identify as clear violations of his established guidelines. She directed questions and comments primarily toward Marcus, while treating my contributions to discussions as interruptions or irrelevant additions that warranted minimal acknowledgement or response. More significantly, Patricia structured the evening's activities to highlight differences between my background and the family's social and economic status, through carefully chosen topics of conversation that emphasized experiences and opportunities that had been unavailable to someone from my middle-class upbringing. Her references to private schools, exclusive vacation destinations, and cultural events were not presented as deliberate exclusion tactics but rather as natural family reminiscences that coincidentally reinforced my outsider status. The psychological sophistication of these techniques was remarkable in their ability to create discomfort and alienation while maintaining superficial compliance with Marcus's requirements for respectful treatment. Patricia had identified methods for continuing her campaign against our relationship that operated through implication and social dynamics, rather than direct confrontation or explicit criticism. During the weeks following this dinner, Patricia expanded her indirect approach through strategic communication with extended family members and family friends who had witnessed her public accusations at Isabella's wedding. Rather than directly contradicting Marcus's boundary-setting efforts, she began carefully cultivating sympathy for her position as a concerned mother who was being silenced by an overly sensitive son and his manipulative wife. These conversations were conducted with careful attention to plausible deniability, allowing Patricia to present herself as the injured party, while avoiding statements that could be characterized as direct violations of Marcus's explicit guidelines. She expressed disappointment about the deterioration of family relationships while carefully avoiding language that could be interpreted as continued attacks on my character or motivations. Patricia's communications with family friends followed similar patterns of indirect manipulation designed to generate support for her position without creating evidence that could be used to demonstrate her continued interference in our marriage. She emphasized her feelings of rejection and isolation while presenting subtle implications about my influence on Marcus's changed behavior toward his family. The effectiveness of these indirect tactics became apparent when Marcus began receiving calls from concerned relatives and family friends who had been influenced by Patricia's carefully crafted narrative about family tensions and her victimization by unreasonable demands for silence regarding legitimate maternal concerns. These well-meaning individuals attempted to mediate the family conflict by encouraging Marcus to reconcile with his mother while expressing subtle pressure for him to be more understanding of her perspective. These mediation attempts created additional stress for Marcus as he found himself defending his boundary-setting decisions to people who had been provided with incomplete or distorted information about the actual nature of Patricia's behavior and the circumstances that had necessitated his confrontation with her manipulation tactics. The psychological pressure of repeatedly explaining and justifying his position to multiple family members and friends began eroding his confidence in the appropriateness of his response to Patricia's actions. More concerning was Patricia's decision to leverage her social connections within Marcus's professional network to gather information about our financial situation, career developments, and personal decisions that could be used to support her ongoing campaign against our relationship. Through carefully orchestrated conversations with mutual acquaintances, she obtained details about our mortgage payments, my teaching salary, and Marcus's professional advancement that she subsequently used to reinforce her narrative about my supposed financial motivations for marrying into the Blackwood family. This surveillance approach represented a significant escalation of Patricia's interference tactics while maintaining the appearance of casual social interaction, rather than deliberate information gathering designed to support her manipulation efforts. Her use of professional and social networks to monitor our private affairs crossed boundaries that extended far beyond inappropriate family dynamics into invasive monitoring that violated reasonable expectations of privacy and autonomy. The most disturbing development occurred when Patricia began making subtle inquiries about our future family planning decisions through conversations with mutual friends and Marcus's colleagues who might have knowledge about our discussions regarding children and long-term goals. Her interest in these intensely personal matters was presented as natural grandmotherly concern rather than strategic intelligence gathering designed to identify vulnerabilities that could be exploited in future conflicts. These inquiries revealed Patricia's long-term strategic thinking about maintaining influence over Marcus's life decisions, despite the boundaries he had attempted to establish. Her focus on future family planning suggested that she was positioning herself to become involved in decisions about children and parenting approaches that would provide new opportunities for control and manipulation extending decades into the future. The cumulative effect of Patricia's evolved strategy was to create constant background pressure on our marriage, while maintaining plausible deniability regarding her continued interference in our relationship. Her techniques operated below the threshold of obvious boundary violations, while systematically undermining the peace and autonomy that Marcus's confrontation had been designed to achieve. Marcus initially struggled to identify the sophisticated nature of his mother's adapted manipulation tactics, because they operated through implication and indirect pressure, rather than the explicit criticism and public confrontation that had characterized her previous behavior. The subtlety of her new approach made it difficult for him to determine whether specific incidents warranted consequences under the guidelines he had established during their restaurant conversation. However, the cumulative effect of multiple subtle violations and the information I provided about Patricia's surveillance activities gradually convinced Marcus that his mother was implementing a systematic campaign to circumvent his boundaries, while maintaining the appearance of compliance with his explicit requirements. This recognition represented a crucial development in his understanding of manipulation dynamics and the need for more comprehensive protective measures. The realization that Patricia possessed the sophistication and determination necessary to adapt her manipulation tactics in response to direct confrontation forced us to reconsider our strategic approach to managing her interference in our relationship. Her willingness to invest significant time and energy in developing alternative methods for maintaining control demonstrated that simple boundary setting would be insufficient for establishing the healthy family dynamics necessary for our marriage to thrive without constant interference. More significantly, Patricia's escalated surveillance and information gathering activities suggested that she viewed our relationship as a long-term threat, requiring sustained countermeasures rather than a temporary challenge that could be resolved through diplomatic negotiation. Her focus on future family planning decisions indicated strategic thinking about maintaining influence over Marcus's life choices, extending far beyond the immediate conflict about her wedding behavior. The evidence that Patricia was leveraging professional and social networks to monitor our private affairs while cultivating support for her position among family members and friends created the need for more comprehensive protective measures than we had initially anticipated. Her sophisticated approach to maintaining manipulation while avoiding obvious boundary violations required equally sophisticated responses that could address indirect tactics and psychological pressure campaigns. This escalation phase revealed that Patricia possessed advanced skills in psychological manipulation that extended far beyond typical family dysfunction into systematic campaigns designed to maintain control, despite explicit resistance from her targets. Her ability to adapt her tactics while maintaining social respectability demonstrated the need for more comprehensive strategies that could address both direct and indirect forms of interference in our relationship. The recognition that we were dealing with sophisticated manipulation, rather than simple family disagreement, represented a crucial turning point in our approach to managing Patricia's behavior and protecting our marriage from continued sabotage. The time had come to implement more serious consequences and comprehensive protective measures that could address the full scope of her interference tactics. The recognition that Patricia had successfully adapted her manipulation tactics to circumvent Marcus's initial boundary-setting efforts required immediate implementation of more sophisticated protective measures designed to address both direct and indirect forms of interference in our relationship. Our previous approach had focused on establishing explicit behavioral guidelines without adequately addressing the psychological sophistication and strategic determination that Patricia brought to her campaign of continued control over Marcus's life decisions. The development of comprehensive countermeasures began with systematic documentation of Patricia's evolved manipulation tactics, including her surveillance activities, indirect exclusion techniques, and strategic cultivation of family support for her position. This documentation process required careful attention to patterns of behavior that individually appeared benign but collectively constituted a coordinated campaign designed to undermine our marriage, while maintaining plausible deniability regarding her continued interference. Marcus and I established a structured approach to gathering evidence that would demonstrate the systematic nature of Patricia's behavior, while providing concrete examples that could be presented to family members, friends, and potentially professional advisors who might become involved in addressing the escalating family conflict. This documentation process involved maintaining detailed records of conversations, social interactions, and information-gathering activities that revealed the strategic sophistication of her approach to maintaining control despite explicit limitations on her behavior. The evidence collection process revealed disturbing patterns that extended far beyond typical family dysfunction into coordinated psychological manipulation designed to isolate us from support systems while generating sympathy for Patricia's position as a concerned mother whose legitimate concerns were being dismissed by an ungrateful son and his manipulative wife. Her ability to maintain social respectability while implementing sophisticated control tactics demonstrated advanced understanding of psychological manipulation techniques that required equally sophisticated responses. Our analysis of Patricia's behavior patterns identified several key vulnerabilities in her approach that could be leveraged to expose the manipulative nature of her actions, while building support for our position among family members and friends who had been influenced by her carefully crafted narrative. These vulnerabilities included inconsistencies between her public statements and documented actions, contradictions between her expressed concerns and her actual behavior toward our relationship, and evidence of surveillance activities that exceeded reasonable boundaries for family involvement. The strategic response we developed incorporated multiple components designed to address different aspects of Patricia's manipulation campaign, while building comprehensive protection for our relationship against continued interference. The first component involved expanding our support network through careful sharing of documented evidence, with trusted family members and friends who possessed the maturity and discretion necessary to understand the complexity of the situation without escalating family tensions through inappropriate involvement or communication. This network expansion process required careful consideration of which individuals could provide meaningful support while maintaining confidentiality regarding sensitive family information. We identified key allies who had witnessed Patricia's behavior patterns over extended periods and possessed sufficient independence from her influence to evaluate evidence objectively, rather than simply accepting her version of family dynamics without question. The second component of our comprehensive strategy involved professional consultation with experts in family psychology and conflict resolution, who could provide objective analysis of Patricia's behavior patterns while offering guidance regarding appropriate responses to sophisticated manipulation tactics. These consultations provided valuable perspective on the psychological dynamics underlying Patricia's need for control, while validating our assessment that her behavior exceeded normal family conflict and required specialized intervention strategies. Professional consultation also provided access to resources and techniques for managing psychological manipulation that extended beyond our personal experience with family dynamics. These experts offered frameworks for understanding the motivations driving Patricia's behavior, while developing strategies for protecting ourselves from continued manipulation without escalating conflicts to destructive levels that would harm innocent family members who were not directly involved in the primary dispute. The third component involved strategic communication with extended family members who had been influenced by Patricia's indirect campaign to generate support for her position. Rather than allowing her narrative to remain unchallenged, we developed carefully planned conversations designed to provide alternative perspectives on family dynamics, while presenting documented evidence that contradicted her characterization of our relationship and her role in family conflicts. These communications required delicate balance between providing necessary information and avoiding defensive responses that might validate Patricia's claims about our oversensitivity to legitimate family concerns. We focused on presenting factual information while allowing recipients to draw their own conclusions about the appropriateness of Patricia's behavior and the validity of her accusations regarding our relationship motivations. The strategic communication process revealed that several family members had developed their own concerns about Patricia's behavior over the years, but had avoided addressing these issues due to her dominant personality and social influence within family circles. Our willingness to present documented evidence and discuss uncomfortable truths about family dynamics provided these individuals with permission to acknowledge their own observations while building support for healthier family relationships, based on mutual respect rather than manipulation and control. The fourth component of our comprehensive strategy involved implementing security measures designed to protect our privacy from Patricia's surveillance activities, while limiting her access to personal information that could be used to support her ongoing campaign against our relationship. These measures included modifications to our social media practices, careful management of professional communications, and strategic limitation of information sharing with family members who might inadvertently provide Patricia with intelligence that could be used against us. Privacy protection also required addressing the professional networks that Patricia had been leveraging to gather information about our financial situation and career developments. We implemented careful screening of social and professional interactions to identify potential sources of information leakage, while maintaining appropriate professional relationships that supported our career advancement, without providing Patricia with ammunition for her accusations regarding our motivations and character. The implementation of comprehensive countermeasures required sustained commitment and careful coordination between Marcus and myself to ensure consistent responses to Patricia's manipulation attempts, while maintaining our individual professional responsibilities and social relationships. This coordination process strengthened our partnership by requiring clear communication about family dynamics and shared commitment to protecting our relationship from continued interference. More significantly, the development of sophisticated protective strategies forced Marcus to confront the full extent of his mother's manipulation tactics and recognize that her behavior represented systematic psychological abuse rather than misguided maternal concern. This recognition was emotionally challenging but psychologically necessary for developing the resolve required to implement consequences that would effectively deter continued interference in our relationship. The strategic implementation process also revealed the importance of maintaining documentation that could support potential legal intervention if Patricia's surveillance and manipulation activities escalated to levels that constituted harassment or defamation. While we hoped that comprehensive protective measures would be sufficient to deter continued interference, the sophistication of her approach suggested that legal consultation might become necessary if her behavior continued escalating despite clear consequences. Professional legal consultation provided valuable perspective on the boundaries between inappropriate family behavior and actionable harassment, while offering guidance regarding documentation standards that would support potential intervention if Patricia's activities crossed legal thresholds. This consultation also provided peace of mind regarding our rights to privacy and protection from systematic interference in our personal and professional lives. The comprehensive strategy we developed created multiple layers of protection that addressed both immediate threats and long-term concerns about Patricia's continued involvement in our life decisions. These measures included immediate consequences for continued manipulation, expanded support networks that could provide assistance during conflicts, professional resources for managing psychological manipulation, and legal protections against escalating harassment or defamation. The implementation of advanced countermeasures also provided important learning opportunities regarding the psychology of manipulation and the skills necessary for protecting healthy relationships from sophisticated interference. These skills would prove valuable not only for managing our specific family situation, but also for recognizing and addressing manipulation in other professional and personal contexts throughout our lives. Most importantly, the development of comprehensive protective strategies demonstrated our commitment to building a healthy marriage based on mutual respect and autonomous decision-making, rather than accepting continued interference from individuals who viewed our relationship as threatening to their control over family dynamics. This commitment required courage and sustained effort, but represented essential investment in our long-term happiness and success as a married couple. The strategic approach we developed also provided frameworks that could be adapted and applied by other individuals facing similar challenges with manipulative family members or controlling personalities in various life contexts. The principles of documentation, strategic communication, professional consultation, and comprehensive protection could serve as templates for addressing sophisticated manipulation in multiple settings while maintaining personal integrity and protecting important relationships. The implementation of advanced countermeasures marked a crucial transition from reactive responses to Patricia's manipulation toward proactive management of family relationships, based on clear boundaries and consistent consequences for inappropriate behavior. This transformation represented significant personal growth for both Marcus and myself, while establishing foundations for healthier family dynamics that could support our marriage and future family planning without constant interference from controlling personalities. The effectiveness of our comprehensive strategy would be tested through Patricia's responses to these enhanced protective measures and her willingness to respect the expanded boundaries we had established through professional guidance and strategic implementation of consequences for continued manipulation. The stage was set for determining whether sophisticated countermeasures would be sufficient to deter her interference, or whether additional escalation would be necessary to protect our relationship from continued sabotage. The implementation of comprehensive protective measures created an immediate shift in the dynamics between our family and Patricia's manipulation campaign, forcing her to recognize that her previous tactics were no longer operating without detection or consequences. The systematic documentation process and expanded support network had effectively eliminated her ability to maintain plausible deniability regarding her continued interference in our relationship, while creating accountability structures that made her behavior visible to family members and friends who had previously been unaware of the sophisticated nature of her manipulation efforts. Patricia's initial response to these enhanced protective measures revealed both her surprise at the comprehensiveness of our counter-strategy and her determination to maintain influence over Marcus's life decisions, despite the escalating consequences for her interference. Rather than acknowledging the inappropriateness of her behavior or accepting the boundaries we had established through professional consultation and strategic planning, she chose to escalate her efforts through increasingly desperate and obvious tactics that would ultimately expose the true extent of her psychological manipulation to previously sympathetic family members. The first indication of Patricia's escalated response occurred during a family gathering at Marcus's Aunt Caroline's home, an event that provided neutral territory for testing whether Patricia would respect the enhanced boundaries we had established through professional guidance. Caroline had been informed about the family tensions, but had not been provided with specific details about Patricia's manipulation tactics, making this gathering an important opportunity to observe Patricia's behavior under circumstances where her actions would be witnessed by extended family members who maintained independent relationships with all parties involved. Patricia arrived at the gathering with carefully prepared talking points designed to generate sympathy for her position, while presenting subtle attacks on our relationship that operated below the threshold of obvious boundary violations. Her approach demonstrated sophisticated understanding of group dynamics and social psychology, as she attempted to leverage Caroline's natural desire for family harmony to pressure Marcus and me into accepting her continued interference in the name of maintaining peaceful relationships. However, the documentation and analysis we had conducted regarding Patricia's manipulation patterns enabled us to recognize her tactics immediately while responding with calm professionalism that contrasted sharply with her increasingly obvious efforts to provoke emotional reactions that would validate her characterization of us as oversensitive and unreasonable. Our prepared responses and consistent boundary enforcement prevented her from achieving the dramatic confrontation she had apparently planned, while making her manipulation efforts visible to other family members who had not previously recognized the strategic nature of her behavior. The gathering also provided an opportunity to implement the strategic communication approaches we had developed through professional consultation, sharing carefully selected information about Patricia's behavior patterns with Caroline in a manner that allowed her to observe and evaluate the evidence without feeling pressured to take sides in what she had previously viewed as a simple family disagreement. This approach proved effective in helping Caroline recognize the systematic nature of Patricia's manipulation, while building support for healthier family dynamics based on mutual respect rather than control and intimidation. Patricia's recognition that her traditional manipulation tactics were no longer effective led to a significant escalation in her interference efforts, through more direct and obvious attempts to undermine our relationship. She began making phone calls to Marcus's colleagues at his investment banking firm, presenting herself as a concerned mother seeking information about his professional performance and personal behavior, while implying that his marriage had created problems affecting his work quality and career advancement potential. These professional interference tactics represented a serious escalation that crossed clear boundaries between family dynamics and career sabotage, creating potential consequences that extended far beyond personal relationships into professional reputation and financial security. The willingness to jeopardize Marcus's career advancement for the sake of maintaining control over his personal relationships revealed the extent of Patricia's desperation and her fundamental prioritization of manipulation over her son's well-being and success. Marcus's response to this professional interference demonstrated significant personal growth in his ability to recognize and address his mother's manipulation while protecting his career from continued sabotage. The systematic documentation process and expanded support network had effectively eliminated her ability to maintain plausible deniability regarding her continued interference in our relationship, while creating accountability structures that made her behavior visible to family members and friends who had previously been unaware of the sophisticated nature of her manipulation efforts. Patricia's initial response to these enhanced protective measures revealed both her surprise at the comprehensiveness of our counter-strategy and her determination to maintain influence over Marcus's life decisions, despite the escalating consequences for her interference. Rather than acknowledging the inappropriateness of her behavior or accepting the boundaries we had established through professional consultation and strategic planning, she chose to escalate her efforts through increasingly desperate and obvious tactics that would ultimately expose the true extent of her psychological manipulation to previously sympathetic family members. The first indication of Patricia's escalated response occurred during a family gathering at Marcus's Aunt Caroline's home, an event that provided neutral territory for testing whether Patricia would respect the enhanced boundaries we had established through professional guidance. Caroline had been informed about the family tensions, but had not been provided with specific details about Patricia's manipulation tactics, making this gathering an important opportunity to observe Patricia's behavior under circumstances where her actions would be witnessed by extended family members who maintained independent relationships with all parties involved. Patricia arrived at the gathering with carefully prepared talking points designed to generate sympathy for her position, while presenting subtle attacks on our relationship that operated below the threshold of obvious boundary violations. Her approach demonstrated sophisticated understanding of group dynamics and social psychology, as she attempted to leverage Caroline's natural desire for family harmony to pressure Marcus and me into accepting her continued interference in the name of maintaining peaceful relationships. However, the documentation and analysis we had conducted regarding Patricia's manipulation patterns enabled us to recognize her tactics immediately while responding with calm professionalism that contrasted sharply with her increasingly obvious efforts to provoke emotional reactions that would validate her characterization of us as oversensitive and unreasonable. Our prepared responses and consistent boundary enforcement prevented her from achieving the dramatic confrontation she had apparently planned, while making her manipulation efforts visible to other family members who had not previously recognized the strategic nature of her behavior. The gathering also provided an opportunity to implement the strategic communication approaches we had developed through professional consultation, sharing carefully selected information about Patricia's behavior patterns with Caroline in a manner that allowed her to observe and evaluate the evidence without feeling pressured to take sides in what she had previously viewed as a simple family disagreement. This approach proved effective in helping Caroline recognize the systematic nature of Patricia's manipulation, while building support for healthier family dynamics based on mutual respect rather than control and intimidation. Patricia's recognition that her traditional manipulation tactics were no longer effective led to a significant escalation in her interference efforts, through more direct and obvious attempts to undermine our relationship. She began making phone calls to Marcus's colleagues at his investment banking firm, presenting herself as a concerned mother seeking information about his professional performance and personal behavior, while implying that his marriage had created problems affecting his work quality and career advancement potential. These professional interference tactics represented a serious escalation that crossed clear boundaries between family dynamics and career sabotage, creating potential consequences that extended far beyond personal relationships into professional reputation and financial security. The willingness to jeopardize Marcus's career advancement for the sake of maintaining control over his personal relationships revealed the extent of Patricia's desperation and her fundamental prioritization of manipulation over her son's well-being and success. Marcus's response to this professional interference demonstrated significant personal growth in his ability to recognize and address his mother's manipulation while protecting his career from continued sabotage. He implemented immediate containment measures through conversations with his supervisor and key colleagues, providing them with context regarding family tensions while establishing clear boundaries regarding professional communications from family members. These protective measures prevented Patricia's interference from creating lasting damage to his professional relationships, while documenting her escalating behavior for potential legal intervention if necessary. The professional interference also provided clear evidence that Patricia's behavior had progressed beyond inappropriate family dynamics into systematic harassment that required more serious consequences than the boundary setting and documentation approaches we had previously implemented. The willingness to attack Marcus's professional reputation in pursuit of relationship control demonstrated pathological levels of manipulation that exceeded normal family conflict and required intervention from external authorities if the behavior continued escalating. Patricia's next escalation involved attempting to recruit Marcus's father James as an ally in her campaign against our relationship, leveraging their marriage relationship to pressure him into supporting her position, despite his apparent recognition that her behavior had become increasingly inappropriate and destructive. This recruitment effort revealed Patricia's desperation as she recognized that her isolation from family support was increasing, while our documentation and strategic communication efforts were building broader recognition of her manipulation tactics. However, James's response to Patricia's recruitment efforts provided unexpected insights into the family dynamics that had been operating for decades beneath the surface of their apparently stable marriage. Rather than automatically supporting his wife's position, James expressed private concerns to Marcus about Patricia's behavior while revealing information about historical patterns of control and manipulation that provided additional context for understanding the psychological dynamics driving her current campaign against our relationship. These revelations from James included acknowledgement that Patricia had demonstrated similar manipulation patterns during previous family conflicts, particularly regarding decisions about Marcus's education, career choices, and previous relationships that had been influenced by her behind-the-scenes interference and control efforts. James's willingness to share this information represented significant validation of our assessment regarding the systematic nature of Patricia's behavior, while providing historical context that explained the sophistication of her manipulation techniques. More significantly, James revealed that he had become increasingly uncomfortable with Patricia's surveillance and information-gathering activities regarding our relationship, recognizing that her behavior exceeded reasonable parental concern and constituted inappropriate interference in their adult son's marriage. His willingness to acknowledge these concerns privately, while declining to support Patricia's escalating campaign, represented an important shift in family dynamics that reduced her ability to present a united parental front in support of her manipulation efforts. The information James provided also included details about Patricia's research into my family background, professional history, and financial situation that revealed the extent of her surveillance activities and her systematic approach to gathering ammunition for her accusations regarding my motivations for marrying Marcus. This intelligence gathering had included private investigation services, background checks, and strategic conversations with mutual acquaintances designed to uncover information that could be used to support her characterization of me as a manipulative individual pursuing financial gain through marriage. James's revelations about the scope of Patricia's surveillance activities provided crucial evidence for documenting the systematic nature of her harassment, while demonstrating that her behavior had progressed far beyond normal family concerns into coordinated campaigns designed to destroy relationships and control family members through psychological manipulation and intimidation. This evidence would prove essential for building legal cases if Patricia's behavior continued escalating despite clear consequences and professional intervention. The family dynamics shift created by James's withdrawal of support for Patricia's manipulation campaign forced her to recognize that her traditional strategies were no longer sustainable, while her isolation from family allies was increasing, as more people became aware of her systematic interference tactics. This recognition led to her most desperate escalation attempt through direct confrontation, designed to force a crisis that would require family members to choose sides while creating maximum emotional impact through public drama and manipulation. Patricia's final escalation involved orchestrating a confrontational family meeting at her home under the pretense of addressing family tensions and seeking resolution through honest communication. However, her actual intention was to create a dramatic confrontation where she could present her carefully prepared accusations against me while leveraging the emotional pressure of family loyalty to force Marcus to choose between supporting his wife or maintaining his relationship with his mother. The meeting she arranged included extended family members who had been provided with selective information about our family tensions, while being positioned as neutral mediators who could help resolve the conflict through compromise and understanding. However, our documentation and strategic preparation enabled us to recognize this setup as a manipulation tactic designed to create maximum pressure for accepting Patricia's continued interference, in exchange for superficial family peace. Marcus's response to this orchestrated confrontation demonstrated remarkable personal growth in his ability to recognize manipulation while maintaining his commitment to protecting our relationship from continued interference. Rather than accepting the premise that family peace required accommodation of his mother's controlling behavior, he presented the documented evidence of her systematic manipulation while establishing clear consequences that would be implemented if her harassment continued regardless of family pressure for compromise. The meeting ultimately backfired on Patricia as the evidence we presented exposed the systematic nature of her manipulation to family members who had been unaware of the sophisticated tactics she had been employing, while her increasingly desperate and obvious control attempts alienated previously sympathetic relatives, who recognized that her behavior exceeded reasonable boundaries for family involvement. The comprehensive failure of Patricia's escalation strategy marked a crucial turning point in the family dynamics, as her manipulation tactics were fully exposed, while her isolation from family support became complete. The pressure test had revealed that our protective measures were effective, while demonstrating that Patricia's commitment to control exceeded her concern for family relationships, or her son's happiness and success. The comprehensive failure of Patricia's orchestrated family confrontation created immediate and profound changes in the dynamics that had governed Blackwood family relationships for decades. Her systematic manipulation tactics, once hidden beneath layers of social respectability and maternal concern, now stood exposed to family members who had previously accepted her version of events without recognizing the sophisticated psychological control mechanism she had been employing to maintain dominance over family decisions and relationships. The aftermath of the confrontational family meeting revealed the extent to which Patricia's influence had been built upon carefully managed information flow and strategic presentation of family narratives that supported her position while suppressing alternative perspectives. Extended family members who had attended the meeting with expectations of mediating a simple family disagreement found themselves confronting documented evidence of systematic harassment, surveillance activities, and manipulation campaigns that exceeded their understanding of normal family conflict dynamics. Marcus's presentation of the comprehensive evidence we had gathered through months of careful documentation created cognitive dissonance among family members who had maintained positive relationships with Patricia, while remaining unaware of her behind-the-scenes interference in family relationships. The professional documentation standards we had employed, guided by expert consultation, provided credibility that made the evidence difficult to dismiss or reinterpret through alternative narratives that might have preserved Patricia's reputation within family circles. The most significant development emerged from the response of Marcus's Aunt Caroline, who had served as an unofficial family matriarch following the deaths of the previous generation, and whose opinion carried substantial weight among extended family members. Caroline's initial attempts to mediate the conflict had been based on assumptions that both parties bore responsibility for family tensions and that compromise solutions could restore harmony through mutual understanding and accommodation. However, Caroline's exposure to the documented evidence of Patricia's systematic manipulation fundamentally altered her perspective on the family dynamics and her assessment of where responsibility for the conflict resided. Her recognition that Patricia had been employing sophisticated psychological tactics to control Marcus's relationships while maintaining public facades of maternal concern created a decisive shift in family allegiances that had previously supported Patricia's position through default assumptions about parental authority and family loyalty. Caroline's public acknowledgement that Patricia's behavior exceeded acceptable boundaries for family involvement provided crucial validation for our position, while establishing precedent for other family members who had harbored private concerns about Patricia's controlling tendencies, but had lacked permission to express those concerns within family contexts that prioritized harmony over honest assessment of problematic behavior patterns. The ripple effects of Caroline's position shift extended throughout the extended family network, as other members felt empowered to acknowledge their own observations about Patricia's manipulation tactics and share information about previous incidents that had been suppressed or minimized to maintain family peace. These revelations created a comprehensive picture of manipulation patterns that had been operating for years beneath the surface of apparently stable family relationships. Marcus's cousin Jennifer revealed that Patricia had attempted to interfere in her college selection process during her senior year of high school, providing negative information about universities that Jennifer had preferred, while promoting alternatives that would have kept her closer to home and more susceptible to family influence. This interference had been presented as helpful guidance rather than manipulation, but Jennifer had recognized the controlling nature of the advice and had made independent decisions despite Patricia's pressure tactics. Additional family members shared similar experiences of subtle interference in their educational choices, career decisions, and relationship selections that revealed the breadth of Patricia's attempts to maintain influence over family members who might otherwise develop independence that would reduce her control over family dynamics. These patterns demonstrated that her manipulation of Marcus's relationships represented part of a systematic approach to family control rather than isolated incidents of maternal overprotection. The accumulation of evidence from multiple family members created an undeniable picture of systematic manipulation that extended far beyond the specific conflicts surrounding our marriage. This broader context provided crucial support for our position, while demonstrating that addressing Patricia's behavior represented necessary intervention for the health of the entire family system, rather than simply protecting our individual relationship from interference. James's response to the exposure of Patricia's manipulation patterns proved particularly significant for understanding the psychological dynamics that had enabled her controlling behavior to persist for decades without effective challenge or intervention. His private conversations with Marcus revealed the extent to which he had been aware of Patricia's manipulation tactics, while feeling unable to address them directly due to the sophisticated psychological pressure she employed to maintain compliance with her preferred family narratives. James disclosed that Patricia had employed similar tactics during the early years of their marriage to isolate him from friendships and professional relationships that she perceived as threatening to her influence over his decisions and priorities. The psychological techniques she had used included emotional manipulation, financial pressure, and strategic use of family loyalty to create circumstances where challenging her preferences resulted in significant personal and professional consequences. This historical context provided crucial insight into how Patricia had developed and refined her manipulation skills over decades of practice, while building psychological dependency patterns that made resistance difficult, even for individuals who recognized the inappropriate nature of her controlling behavior. James's willingness to acknowledge these dynamics represented significant personal courage, while providing Marcus with understanding of the family patterns that had shaped his own development and relationship expectations. The revelations about Patricia's historical manipulation also explained the sophisticated nature of her interference in our marriage, and her ability to adapt her tactics when confronted with direct resistance. Her decades of experience in psychological control had taught her to recognize and circumvent various forms of opposition while maintaining social respectability that protected her from external intervention or accountability. However, the comprehensive exposure of her manipulation patterns during the family confrontation had eliminated her ability to maintain plausible deniability regarding her behavior, while creating family awareness that made future manipulation attempts more difficult to execute without detection. The shift in family dynamics had essentially removed the social cover that had enabled her controlling behavior to operate without effective opposition or consequence. Patricia's response to this fundamental change in family dynamics revealed both her recognition that her traditional manipulation strategies were no longer viable and her unwillingness to accept the loss of control that resulted from family members' increased awareness of her psychological tactics. Rather than acknowledging the inappropriate nature of her behavior or accepting the boundaries that had been established through family consensus, she chose to escalate through increasingly desperate attempts to regain influence and control. Her initial response involved attempting to reframe the family conflict as a conspiracy against her by individuals who were motivated by jealousy of her success and resentment of her leadership role within the family structure. This reframing attempt was designed to appeal to her few remaining supporters while positioning herself as a victim of unfair treatment, rather than acknowledging responsibility for the systematic manipulation that had created the current family tensions. However, the comprehensive nature of the evidence that had been presented during the family confrontation made this reframing strategy ineffective with most family members who had witnessed the documented patterns of harassment and interference that clearly exceeded normal family dynamics. The professional quality of our documentation and the consistency of testimony from multiple family members created credibility that Patricia's alternative narrative could not effectively challenge or discredit. Patricia's recognition that her reframing attempts were failing led to more direct efforts to punish family members who had withdrawn their support for her position, while attempting to isolate Marcus from family connections that might reinforce his independence from her influence. These punishment tactics included withdrawal of financial support she had previously provided to various family members, exclusion from social events she organized or influenced, and strategic distribution of negative information designed to damage relationships between family members who had opposed her manipulation efforts. The implementation of these punishment tactics represented a significant strategic error that further exposed the vindictive nature of Patricia's motivations, while demonstrating that her concern for family welfare had been subordinated to her desire for control and dominance over family relationships. Family members who might have maintained some sympathy for her position recognized that her willingness to damage family relationships, rather than accept reduced influence, revealed the true nature of her priorities and motivations. The punishment tactics also provided additional evidence that could be used to document her pattern of retaliatory behavior against individuals who resisted her manipulation efforts. This documentation would prove valuable for potential legal intervention if her harassment activities continued escalating beyond the boundaries of family conflict into areas that constituted actionable interference with professional activities or personal safety. Marcus's response to Patricia's escalating retaliation demonstrated remarkable personal growth in his ability to maintain boundaries while protecting himself and our relationship from continued manipulation attempts. His willingness to accept the consequences of opposing his mother's controlling behavior, including potential loss of family connections and financial support, represented crucial psychological development that established his commitment to building healthy relationships based on mutual respect rather than manipulation and control. The support Marcus received from previously neutral family members validated his position while providing encouragement for maintaining the boundaries necessary to protect our marriage from continued interference. This family support created positive reinforcement for his decision to prioritize healthy relationship dynamics over preserving artificial family harmony that required acceptance of systematic manipulation and psychological abuse. The overall shift in family dynamics created opportunities for building more authentic relationships based on honest communication and mutual respect, rather than the carefully managed information flow and strategic positioning that had characterized family interactions under Patricia's influence. These opportunities represented significant improvements in family health that extended far beyond resolving the immediate conflicts surrounding our marriage to create foundations for healthier patterns that could support all family members' independence and well-being. The transformation of family dynamics also provided crucial learning experiences regarding the recognition and management of manipulation tactics that would prove valuable for addressing similar challenges in other life contexts. The skills we had developed through professional consultation and strategic planning could be applied to workplace dynamics, social relationships, and other situations where individuals might encounter sophisticated psychological manipulation designed to control behavior and limit autonomy. Most importantly, the aftermath of Patricia's failed manipulation campaign demonstrated that systematic psychological abuse could be effectively challenged and overcome through comprehensive documentation, strategic communication, and consistent boundary enforcement supported by professional guidance and family allies who prioritized healthy relationships over artificial harmony maintained through acceptance of controlling behavior. The fundamental shift in family dynamics created unprecedented opportunities for Marcus and me to establish authentic relationships with family members who had previously maintained distance due to Patricia's influence and the complex web of loyalties she had carefully orchestrated over decades of psychological manipulation. These opportunities required thoughtful navigation as we worked to build genuine connections while remaining vigilant against Patricia's continued attempts to undermine the progress we had achieved through systematic documentation and strategic boundary enforcement. The process of rebuilding family relationships began with individual conversations designed to address the years of tension and misunderstanding that had resulted from Patricia's systematic interference in family communications. These conversations required careful balance between acknowledging past difficulties and focusing on future possibilities for more authentic connections based on mutual respect and honest communication, rather than the carefully managed narratives that had previously governed family interactions. Marcus's relationship with his father James underwent particularly significant transformation as they began addressing the psychological dynamics that had prevented genuine father-son connection for many years. James's acknowledgement of Patricia's manipulation tactics created space for honest discussion about family history, while providing Marcus with understanding of the pressures that had shaped his father's behavior during crucial developmental periods. These conversations revealed that James had harbored deep regret about his inability to protect Marcus from Patricia's controlling influence during his childhood and adolescence, particularly regarding educational decisions, social relationships, and career guidance that had been systematically manipulated to serve Patricia's preferences rather than Marcus's authentic interests and natural development patterns. James's willingness to acknowledge his complicity in enabling Patricia's manipulation through passive acceptance and conflict avoidance represented significant personal courage, while providing Marcus with validation for experiences he had questioned throughout his adult life. The recognition that his instincts about family dysfunction had been accurate created psychological healing that enabled him to approach family relationships with increased confidence and clarity about appropriate boundaries. The father-son relationship development also provided James with opportunities to share aspects of family history that had been suppressed or distorted through Patricia's narrative management, including information about extended family relationships, career opportunities, and personal interests that had been sacrificed to maintain domestic harmony under Patricia's psychological pressure campaigns. These revelations helped Marcus understand the broader context of family dysfunction, while recognizing that his mother's manipulation had affected multiple generations of family relationships, through systematic suppression of information and strategic interference in connections that might have challenged her control over family dynamics and decision-making processes. My own relationship development with James proceeded more gradually due to the years of negative characterization I had endured through Patricia's influence and the natural caution that results from systematic character assassination campaigns. However, James's recognition of the parallels between Patricia's treatment of me and her historical manipulation of his own relationships created empathy that enabled genuine connection despite the artificial barriers that had been constructed through years of psychological manipulation. James's acknowledgement that Patricia's accusations against me reflected projection of her own manipulative tendencies rather than accurate assessment of my character or motivations provided crucial validation, while demonstrating his commitment to evaluating family relationships based on direct observation, rather than accepting second-hand characterizations from individuals with demonstrated histories of distortion and manipulation. The extended family relationship rebuilding process revealed the extent to which Patricia's influence had systematically prevented authentic connections between family members who might have developed strong supportive relationships under healthier circumstances. Aunt Caroline's leadership in acknowledging the manipulation patterns enabled other family members to share their own experiences while building collective understanding of the psychological dynamics that had governed family interactions for decades. These collective discussions created opportunities for family members to recognize their shared experiences with Patricia's manipulation, while developing mutual support systems that could resist future attempts at psychological control and interference. The recognition that her tactics had been systematically applied across multiple relationships reduced individual feelings of responsibility for family tensions, while building solidarity among family members who had been isolated through strategic division and psychological pressure. Jennifer's sharing of her college selection experience revealed that Patricia's educational interference had extended beyond Marcus to include other family members whose independence and autonomous decision-making had been perceived as threats to her overall family control strategy. This broader pattern recognition helped family members understand that resistance to Patricia's influence represented healthy boundary setting, rather than family disloyalty or ingratitude for her guidance and support. The process of building authentic family relationships also required addressing the practical consequences of Patricia's retaliation against family members who had withdrawn their support for her manipulation campaigns. Her strategic withdrawal of financial assistance and social inclusion created immediate challenges for relatives who had become accustomed to her support while building psychological dependency that complicated their ability to maintain independence from her influence. Marcus and I developed strategies for providing alternative support systems that could help family members transition away from dependency on Patricia's resources while building sustainable independence that would resist future manipulation attempts. These support strategies included professional networking assistance, emotional support during difficult transitions, and practical guidance for managing the social and financial consequences of establishing healthy boundaries with controlling family members. The implementation of alternative support systems demonstrated our commitment to building family health rather than simply protecting our individual relationship from interference. This approach created positive momentum for family transformation, while providing practical evidence that healthy relationships could offer more sustainable support than manipulation-based control systems that required constant vigilance and psychological pressure to maintain compliance. Patricia's response to the loss of her traditional influence mechanisms involved increasingly desperate attempts to regain control through escalation of her retaliation tactics and exploration of new manipulation strategies designed to exploit any remaining vulnerabilities in our protective systems. Her recognition that family support had shifted away from her position led to more direct attacks on our professional reputations and social connections outside the immediate family context. These escalated attacks included systematic campaigns to damage my teaching career through strategic communications with school administrators, parent organizations, and community leaders who might influence my professional opportunities and advancement potential. Patricia's approach to professional sabotage demonstrated sophisticated understanding of education politics and community dynamics, while revealing the extent of her determination to punish my resistance to her manipulation efforts. The professional attacks also extended to Marcus's investment banking career through continued interference with his colleagues and clients, strategic distribution of negative information about his judgment and reliability, and attempts to create professional conflicts that might damage his advancement opportunities and financial security. These attacks represented significant escalation beyond family conflict into systematic harassment that required immediate legal intervention and professional protection strategies. Our response to Patricia's escalated professional interference involved comprehensive documentation of her harassment activities, while implementing legal protection measures designed to prevent continued damage to our careers and professional reputations. The systematic nature of her attacks provided clear evidence for potential legal action, while demonstrating that her behavior had progressed beyond family dysfunction into actionable harassment that warranted external intervention. Legal consultation provided valuable guidance regarding the documentation standards required for harassment claims, while offering strategic advice about protective measures that could prevent continued professional sabotage. The legal framework also provided psychological support through recognition that Patricia's behavior exceeded normal family conflict and required serious intervention to protect our rights and professional opportunities. The professional protection strategies we implemented included comprehensive communication with supervisors and colleagues regarding the family situation, strategic documentation of Patricia's interference attempts, and legal notification designed to deter continued harassment through clear consequences for future professional sabotage activities. These protective measures proved effective in containing the immediate damage while building comprehensive documentation that could support more serious legal intervention if Patricia's harassment activities continued escalating beyond the boundaries of professional interference into areas that might threaten personal safety or financial security. The process of addressing Patricia's escalated retaliation also provided opportunities for building stronger professional relationships based on honest communication about personal challenges and the support systems necessary for maintaining effectiveness despite external harassment and manipulation attempts. Colleagues and supervisors who became aware of our situation provided unexpected support while recognizing the professionalism we maintained despite significant personal stress and ongoing family conflict. This professional support created additional validation for our approach to managing Patricia's manipulation, while demonstrating that authentic relationships based on mutual respect and honest communication could withstand external attempts at sabotage and character assassination. Most importantly, the comprehensive approach we developed for addressing Patricia's escalated retaliation provided practical frameworks that could be applied by other individuals facing similar challenges with systematic harassment and professional sabotage from controlling family members or other manipulative personalities in various life contexts. The transformation of family dynamics through exposure of Patricia's manipulation tactics created sustainable foundations for healthier relationships while providing protection against future attempts at psychological control and interference. The collective recognition of her tactics among family members created accountability structures that would make future manipulation attempts more difficult to execute without detection and resistance. The overall success of our strategic approach to managing Patricia's manipulation demonstrated that systematic psychological abuse could be effectively challenged and overcome through comprehensive documentation, strategic communication, professional consultation, and consistent boundary enforcement supported by family allies who prioritized authentic relationships over artificial harmony maintained through acceptance of controlling behavior. The systematic documentation of Patricia's escalated harassment activities provided sufficient evidence for our legal counsel to initiate formal proceedings designed to establish clear legal boundaries regarding her continued interference in our professional and personal lives. The transition from family conflict management to legal intervention represented a significant escalation that reflected both the seriousness of Patricia's behavior and our commitment to protecting our careers and relationship from continued systematic sabotage. The legal framework we implemented through professional consultation included cease and desist orders that specifically outlined the harassment behaviors that must terminate immediately, restraining orders that established clear physical and communication boundaries, and comprehensive documentation systems that would support more serious legal action if Patricia's interference continued despite formal legal notification. Patricia's initial response to legal intervention revealed both her surprise at the seriousness of the consequences she faced and her continued underestimation of our resolve to protect ourselves from her manipulation campaigns. Her immediate reaction involved attempts to characterize the legal action as excessive response to normal family disagreements, while maintaining her position that her behavior represented legitimate parental concern rather than systematic harassment requiring external intervention. However, the comprehensive nature of the evidence we had gathered through months of systematic documentation made Patricia's defensive characterizations difficult to maintain when subjected to legal scrutiny and professional evaluation by attorneys and mental health experts who specialized in harassment cases and family manipulation dynamics. The legal proceedings also provided opportunities for additional evidence to emerge regarding Patricia's systematic interference in our lives and the lives of other family members who had previously remained silent about their experiences with her manipulation tactics due to fear of retaliation or social consequences within family and community contexts. Marcus's cousin David came forward with detailed accounts of Patricia's interference in his business decisions during the early stages of his entrepreneurial career, revealing that she had systematically undermined his professional relationships and financial opportunities through strategic distribution of negative information and deliberate sabotage of networking connections that might have supported his business development efforts. David's testimony provided crucial corroboration for the patterns of professional interference that Patricia had employed against us, while demonstrating that her harassment tactics extended beyond our specific situation to include systematic campaigns against any family member who developed independence or success that might challenge her control over family dynamics and resource allocation. Additional family members provided testimony regarding Patricia's historical use of financial manipulation, emotional blackmail, and strategic information warfare to maintain control over family decisions and relationships. These testimonies created a comprehensive picture of systematic psychological abuse that had operated for decades beneath the surface of apparently normal family relationships. The accumulation of testimony from multiple family members provided legal evidence that Patricia's behavior represented persistent patterns of harassment rather than isolated incidents that might be dismissed as family disagreements or temporary conflicts that could be resolved through mediation or counseling approaches. The legal process also revealed the extent of Patricia's surveillance activities and information-gathering campaigns that had violated reasonable expectations of privacy, while creating detailed profiles of family members' personal lives, professional activities, and financial circumstances that could be leveraged for future manipulation attempts. Private investigation records obtained through legal discovery showed that Patricia had employed professional services to monitor our daily activities, financial transactions, and social interactions, while gathering intelligence that could be used to support her accusations or identify vulnerabilities that might be exploited in future conflicts. The surveillance activities extended beyond casual observation to include systematic monitoring of our communications, professional relationships, and community involvement activities. This comprehensive intelligence gathering operation demonstrated sophisticated planning and significant financial investment in maintaining control over family members who had attempted to establish independence from her influence. Legal experts characterized Patricia's surveillance and harassment activities as representing systematic stalking behavior that exceeded normal family conflict boundaries, while creating environments of intimidation and fear designed to suppress resistance to her manipulation efforts. The formal legal designation of Patricia's behavior as stalking and harassment provided crucial validation for our experiences while establishing clear legal frameworks for protection against continued interference in our personal and professional lives. Patricia's response to the legal characterization of her behavior as stalking involved desperate attempts to reframe her actions as protective parental concern, while denying the systematic nature of her surveillance and interference activities. Her legal representation attempted to present her behavior as misguided, but well-intentioned efforts to ensure her son's welfare, rather than calculated campaigns designed to maintain psychological control through intimidation and manipulation. However, the comprehensive documentation we had maintained through professional guidance provided clear evidence of systematic planning and strategic implementation that contradicted characterizations of her behavior as spontaneous emotional reactions or misguided parental concern. The legal proceedings also created opportunities for mental health professionals to evaluate Patricia's psychological condition and provide expert testimony regarding the motivations and patterns underlying her manipulation tactics. These professional evaluations revealed personality disorders and control mechanisms that explained her systematic approach to family manipulation, while providing frameworks for understanding the psychological dynamics that had enabled her behavior to persist for decades without effective intervention. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.